Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the PowerLess podcast. In this episode, I talked to Liam Horrigan, who is the primary songwriter, lyricist, vocalist, and guitarist of the three-piece alternative punk band CruelHope out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We talk a lot about what got Liam into writing music, what got the bands and sort of the riffs and the songs and things like that he heard that really got him into guitar-based or punk music, as well as the very upfront political messaging and social commentary messaging that CruelHope has in nearly every single one of their songs. We deep dive a few of the lyrics and the inspirations for the songs, where Liam's political ideology has come from, both in everyday life that kind of radicalized him, as well as some of the musical influences and political influences and all those kinds of things. And we talk in detail of what Liam's hoping to do in the next year with CruelHope as far as releases go and shows and everything in between. So it was great to meet and talk to Liam. This is one of my favorite episodes I've done because it's very much an encapsulation of politically charged music that really hits a lot of topics that I care about on the head in a catchy fashion, in a fun fashion, instrumentally, very energetic, very, very punk rock, and yet being very conscious and very pointed with the lyrical content. So again, great episode with Liam. I really appreciate that he came on. I hope you all enjoy the episode. Make sure to follow CruelHope on all socials, listen to them on Spotify, on all the streaming platforms. All of the socials and everything in between will be in the notes below from wherever you're listening to this or watching this. And I just really hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Before we get into the episode, as a reminder, you can always contact me at thepowerlesspod at gmail.com, at thepowerlesspod on all socials. And make sure to get in contact with me there if you're a band or an activist, journalist, political commentator that wants to talk about music and or politics. Have a few pretty great episodes coming up in those veins. Contact me if you just enjoy the show, or if you don't, if you think things that Liam and I talk about here are totally false, let me know. Help out in the algorithm and leave some hate comments, whatever. I'm here for all of it. And again, one thing I kind of forget to plug a lot when I do these, or I haven't even been doing intros a lot, is if you're into the show, if you have been listening to a lot of the episodes lately, try to support on Patreon if you have the means to do so. It's $2.50 a month. Again, that'll be in the link tree below in the notes to support the show. It helps me with editing platforms that I use and having time to put all this together. So I really appreciate the people that have done that. And of course, unfortunately, the last thing that I'm going to go over here before we get into the episode with Liam and talk about everything CruelHope is the recent numbers that came out just a couple of days ago from Euromed Monitor on the ongoing Israel genocide on the Gaza Strip. As of May 13th, 43,640 people are dead. Over 39,000 of them are civilians. 16,000 of them are children. There have been 141 journalists killed. This is the deadliest conflict for journalists in modern history. There have been over 2 million people displaced, over 81,000 people injured. 931 healthcare professionals killed, and over 3,000 detained or forcibly disappeared. Those are the numbers from Euromed Monitor. Again, in the fog of war, these numbers are probably still an undercount. And it's just important to keep these things in perspective, that this is continuing to go on. This is not slowing down. There's invasions of refugee camps. There are mass graves being pulled up. There are a lot of different things that you can see right now with the ongoing torture and concentration camps that have been revealed recently and confirmed by CNN and even in other major outlets. So it's just a really, really, really despicable and preventable situation. So please go to ceasefiretoday.com. You can use that to find ways to pressure politicians to donate if you have the means to donate, to find protests near you, anything big or small that you can do to help out with charging those with power to finally do the right thing to stop this ongoing genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid from happening. And of course, there's also a lot of protests still going on at campuses around the country and around the world. You can go to Campus Bail Fund as well to support there if you think you have the means to help out with some of the bail to get some people that are wrongfully arrested out of jail and things of that nature. So, and all those links will be in the notes. But just if you have the time, if you have 10 minutes out of your day, go to those links, help out where you can, apply pressure where you can, because it's just the right thing to do. After all that, we're going to get back into the episode here with Liam Horrigan, who is the singer, songwriter, and guitarist of the band CruelHope out of Ontario, Canada. I am here with Liam Horrigan. That's how you say your last name, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always ask that at the start of the episodes lately because I feel like there's going to be one that I just totally fuck up the last name. But yeah, I'm here with Liam Horrigan, who is the guitarist and vocalist of the band CruelHope, which is a self-described, and I would say this is accurate, a political alt-punk band from Toronto, Ontario. Absolutely ecstatic to have you on. I'm a big fan of your music. After we got in contact a little bit and you were like, I think we'd be a good fit because we got some anti-capitalist messaging in the music. I looked it up. It's very much in the forefront of your bios and all that. Listened to it, listened to the music, and I was like, yep, this is definitely someone I need to talk to. So happy to have you on today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here and chat music and politics and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it's good. I've had a couple. It's good to have like somebody that is in a like politically charged band from Canada because I've had a couple of Canadian guests on. I've had some over the year of the show. Had a political commentator on that does a show out of Montreal. Had the band Silverstein on, that's from Ontario, and we talked a little bit about their more politically charged songs. And there's if you haven't played a show with them yet, I think there's a band from Windsor that I had on called Riverside Drive that they're not as open, like upfront politically charged as you guys, but they have at least one song that is a total great like political banger. So that's my little plug for you to get in contact with that band to play a show with them in Windsor sometime because I think it'd be a good fit. But again, happy to have you on. I thought what we would do today is get into, especially since, as we just said, your music is politically influenced. It's not even just that it's in the lyrics; it's very much at the forefront of what your messaging is from your band overall. We would both get into how you got started in music, how you started writing your own music, and then where politics and maybe music kind of mesh for your political journey there as well. I also like to have people on that aren't American to talk about politics because it's good for us to remember that like shit gets crazy everywhere.
So especially these days.
Especially
really
these
wild
days.
everywhere.
There's definitely some I would say fun, but it's all terrible. But some terribly cynical shenanigans that happen in Canadian politics as well. So I feel like I'm redundant here, but happy to have you on here. What I've been doing with people lately with the show, just to kind of get, both maybe get into some bands I haven't heard of or listeners haven't heard of, as well as kind of see where you're at in the music you're listening to. What are some bands, some artists that you've been listening to lately that would be at like on repeat if you listen through Spotify or something similar? What have you been listening to, or if there's bands that you've been enjoying that you think deserve a shout out, just kind of tell me what you've been listening to lately.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned interviewing Silverstein because they're way up there these days.
Yeah.
Especially their newer stuff. I've been really impressed with like the way they've adapted their sound from like the early kind of like emo, screamo kind of vibes to now like a much more mature, like alt metal kind of sound, and as well branching out like lyrically from, again, the typical kind of emo themes to a lot more like interesting political stuff. And like, I find myself comparing because a lot of my messages are very similar to what Shane Told is singing about. But what takes me like 4 lines to hit, he just like hits it in like 1 line. And it's like, man, this guy's brilliant at what he does. But yeah, like just listening to a ton of Silverstein, a lot of Rise Against as well, of course. Yeah. Like I think pretty much any even remotely political and remotely punk band, like you're going to be listening to a lot of Rise Against. And then I've been getting into a lot of stuff out of the UK. I find, especially these days, like their rock scene's producing some really interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. there's a punk band called Kid Capici that makes some really funny, like it's very like the music is serious, like if they're not like a comedy band, but it's very tongue-in-cheek, like ironic kind of stuff. They have a song called Rob the Supermarket about stealing stuff from self-checkouts that's just like it's the funniest like lyrical content to put in like a serious sounding punk song, but it's an absolute banger. They've got like a ton of that kind of stuff. Don Broco and Boston Manor as well out of the UK are really good, but Kid Capici for whatever reason just like they're pretty small these days too, so it's like it's fun that I've sort of
I can't believe I've never really heard of them before, because I see them on, at least on Spotify, they have like 279,000 listeners.
Yeah, they've been growing, which is nice. Yeah,
that's what's crazy about the rock scene in the UK. And also, you can talk about bands like Billy Talent or something like that out of Canada, where there will be these bands from those areas that, like, Americans are so like US centric that you think like all the big bands because all the big bands play here, which is mostly true. But there's like this whole sect of music where like Billy Talent as an example will play a stadium in Canada and then come here and maybe play a House of Blues. You know what I mean? And I feel like there's a lot of that in the UK where there's all these bands. Like I can think of on like the heavier or like electronic side of things. I mean, they've built up a big audience here now relatively, but still nothing compared to the UK. Like Enter Shikari as an example where, they're big here. I'm not saying there's some little underground band no one knows, but then you'll see them play like Wembley in the UK, and you're like, that is not registered to me at all. And Billy Talent's that way, and it's crazy to see like Kid Capici have that many listeners, and I've literally never fucking heard of this band before. So I instant save. I'm gonna check them out after this. Boston Manor is such a great band. They're a band that like. You ever have those bands that you just listen to, like, you don't even follow them that much, but there's one album from them that you just like are obsessed with? That's me with Welcome to the Neighborhood from them. I know I need to check out the rest of their catalog, but for whatever reason, I just go back to that record over and over and like bought it on vinyl and still don't listen to the rest of the catalog, which like, why are you so ecstatic about an album and you don't check out the rest of the music? But those are all great picks, and it's a reminder for me. This is why I really do this, because I have the memory of a newt to remember to check out these bands that I already sort of know of, and just like they kind of fall off the back burner for me. Yeah. But those are all great picks. And to the Silverstein thing, like I feel that way big time. There's a lot of they've blown up big time in popularity. Not that they weren't popular before in like the emo Warped Tour scene and all that, but I feel like their music, especially that last record they put out, just like really took it over the top as far as like the lyricism goes, which, now they're more collaborative with both one of their guitarists and Shane writing their lyrics. And I think that's a good, it's one of those things where someone comes in and starts writing and it actually like totally takes it over the top as far as the lyrics go. So super agreed on like the political, charge and other songs that they have too. And the last couple of records, it's been so good. Thanks for going over that. I always love doing that because then there's always one more band I need to check out, which is great. To start off here, Liam, let's go ahead and tell me what first got you started being interested in music as far back as you can go. Could be a family member, if you have older siblings or a cousin or something. Could be like if you were in band, like a band kid that showed you emo music for the first time. Could have been Fuse or whatever, or Much Music, I guess is what it is in Canada, or what it was. As far back as you can go, tell me like when you first really got invested in the music, where it became a big part of your life.
Yeah, for sure. So like, I started playing music with like piano lessons, just like the same as every suburban kid. Like I grew up in suburban Ottawa, everyone was doing piano lessons. But I first really like realized like kind of the point of making music when Holiday by Green Day first came on the radio while I was listening, and that intro riff, I was just like, I'd never heard anything like. But I was like 9 at the time, so I hadn't really heard much of anything. My parents were like big like Simon and Garfunkel kind of fans, distorted guitar wasn't a big part of my childhood up until then, and I was just like, damn, like this is awesome. And I just had this urge to like make similar stuff. And like, it took me a while to sort of act on that, because then where I went from there was my brother. I had an older brother, older by 3 years. He was learning guitar and he was putting together a band, and they needed a bass player. And so naturally, like, I swear to God, like 90% of bass players are younger siblings, because this happens to like all of us, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, he's got a younger brother who's into some of the same music. It's like, here's a bass. You're in the band now. And that was honestly, it was really good, because like I sucked for a long time, but like, because, you know, I was like 12. They're all like, they've been playing for a little longer. And like, but as a result, like, because I was punching above my weight for so long, like I got pretty good, and I got good faster than a lot of my peers, like especially at bass. My brother as well was like very into Tool and like a lot of those bands with like weird time signatures and stuff like that. So, you know, 14, 50-year-old me still wasn't really getting it. But by the time I was like 16 or 17, it was like, okay, this stuff makes sense. And like, that's really been like a powerful thing to carry through, because like understanding that stuff, even like I don't write it in crazy time signatures now, but like having that sense of rhythm and that ability to like keep track of like nice syncopated kind of stuff and like just instinctively follow those things has been a huge part of making writing music possible for me since. So that's really like where I went from there. And yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something really important there that I don't know that I've talked about on the show that much, of like getting into very intricate music helps you, even if you're making, you know, I'm not saying your music isn't like a 4-chord punk band, but even if you were just like in a 4-chord punk band, having that knowledge, or say you were like some acoustic songwriter that, you know, plays pretty simple stuff and delivers, delivers melodies over the top. Like having that knowledge and having that intricacy helps you write a good song, even if you like throw all those layers in and then rip them all back to like put it to bare bones. I think there's something to being able to play that stuff or understanding it, even if you can't play it.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference in like you creating something unique. Like I do you kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And it's like, what's interesting about it too is you see that reflected in like even the poppiest of pop singers these days. They can do that stuff too. Like the craziest example for me is like Doja Cat. Like she makes like R&B, hip hop, like super pop stuff. And then you find out like she used to be a metal vocalist at one of the, I don't know if it's the VMAs or like one of those awards shows. She went on stage and did a metal cover of Say So. And it was like, this rips. Like this is, you know, a completely different side of this artist. And you realize like, they're not making simple music because that's all they can make. They're making simple music because that's what they want to make. Mm-hmm. But they are fully seasoned. Like they have like the equivalent of a, you know, PhD in art. Yeah. They could make anything they want to. It's just they choose to make this. And like, I don't know, like that made me respect pop a lot more too, because it's like all of these choices are intentional. It's not simple because it can't be anything more. It's simple because they want it to be simple. And like, yeah, I don't know. It's a really interesting lesson, especially for like, if there's any prog snobs listening, you know, go listen to a Taylor Swift album. She can do what you can. Can you do what she can? Right.
Well, and that reminds me of like what you're saying about Doja Cat. Like that reminds me of, there was I was like, my wife and I like years back now, this must have been like during COVID when we would like look up YouTube videos of like bands all the time to feel something, you know, but we were watching some Lady Gaga videos, and I remember watching her go on stage with Metallica and just, I forget which songs, it was a couple of songs, but she ripped them, right? Like just like obviously like sings better than James Hetfield does, right? But could do like the gritty, like really like classic metal vocals that like Metallica fans were not mad about the fact that Lady Gaga came up and like sang these songs. And it's a reminder of like, like you said, like prog snobs or like, you know, metal gatekeepers, you know, which is a whole, or punk gatekeepers, right? Like, it's a good reminder that like, no, these are like people that know their shit. Like half the pop singers you hear went to Juilliard or something, and also like you said, might have played in a punk band or like were really into hardcore or something. And again, it goes back to like that knowledge of music, no matter what you're making, like makes a big impact on like the thumb or like the fingerprint that you can kind of put on your own music, right? Where you can make it very much singular, even if it's, in a, what would be called like a simpler genre, right? Like that's cool, both that you bring that up and that you like realize that as someone in a punk band, where there's a lot of like anti-pop and anti-mainstream and a lot of like heavier scenes in general. But going from that, you start playing in a bass band. You start playing bass in a band with your older brother, which is classic. Yeah. I can attest to that with like my cousins and stuff too growing up. When did you kind of switch over to wanting to do your own band, write your own music, and where in the trajectory of that did CruelHope come from?
Yeah, so I kind of like when I graduated high school, I went to university and I kind of like I was focused on studies for a while, and like music kind of took a back burner. And I was like, like I'd really internalized what especially my parents had been saying about like, art is great, but like have a, real job. For anyone listening, I'm doing air quotes around that. Music is a real job, but like have a backup plan. And so the backup plan kind of became the main plan for a long time. And eventually I just kind of got burned out on it because I was spending a ton of time. I graduated, I started working, and like it wasn't really fulfilling because music was what I really wanted to be doing, but it demanded the time and energy of like it expected somebody that would find it fulfilling. Like it wanted that person that really wanted to be there, putting in the extra hours. And like, that wasn't really me in the jobs I was getting. And so I burned out on it. I kind of reset. I was outside of Toronto at this point, and then I decided, all right, I'm going to move back to Toronto and I'm going to focus on music. I'd been, casually writing throughout that whole period, but I'm going to focus on writing more stuff. I'm going to put together some bands. I'm going to see where we go. And so I moved back to Toronto February of 2020, if you know where this story's going.
Yeah. Then, great time to start a music endeavor,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
Right? It was, I had it all lined up. I got a job at a music store even. Like I committed all the way. And then, everything shut down. No more live music. But the music store I was working at stayed open in person. So, I got to watch as like everybody's isolating, everybody's at home. Somehow I'm an essential worker selling guitar strings. Like I'm on the subway every day to and from my job, even though the store itself is closed. We're just fulfilling online orders. And like that absurdity coupled with just like, I've been getting more into politics, especially like around burning out and like the experiences of like toxic workplaces, realizing like just how much it sucks to, rely on bosses for your daily bread. Like all of that was kind of coming together. And then just the absurdity of this situation, CruelHope was kind of born as a way to make sense of that. Like I was writing these songs at work a lot of the time with, just an acoustic guitar and a lot of frustration and confusion about the state of the world. And I remember in particular, a bunch of these songs were born when we started reopening because we needed to maintain capacity limits. So someone had to be at the door at all times to decide whether or not someone was going to be going into the store. And we realized, well, that person doesn't have to sit there. They can have a guitar, they can have fun. And so as soon as we realized that, I just volunteered for that position every single day. And I wrote like probably about 10 songs that became the basis for CruelHope during that period. So it was just, me with this acoustic guitar, like, humming away in there. And it took a while before the band ever got to play live because, of course, everything was shut down. But that was really where it was born, was, just out of that absurdity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, I think this is something I've been talking with people a lot lately. I know a lot of very politically active people, a lot of, people that are in organizations or are journalists or commentators or whatever else. And they'll kind of talk about like these various like theories that they, like whether they're reading like a Noam Chomsky book or getting involved in like a communist party or all these different things. And all that stuff I'm very, very, very into. Don't get me wrong. And I think it's good for people to kind of understand history and where things come from. But it's just kind of this stance of like life at this point, especially COVID on. Life radicalizes people, right? Because think about the fact of, you working at a music store deemed an essential worker for working at a music store during a pandemic, right? And then and then you're like, all of a sudden they're like, you know, having to, and I understand like you got to do it in a fun way, but the idea of like someone being paid at a music store to be like, eventually like, nope, sorry, you can't come in, get out. And like, yeah, I'm sure that the government and everyone that called everybody essential workers totally went and upped everybody's pay and made it a livable wage, and everyone's living a total dignified life now, right? Like that didn't happen in the United States, but it clearly happened in the utopian Canada, right?
Well, what was beautiful, just can only laugh. What was beautiful about it in Canada, and again I say that with utmost sarcasm, was it wasn't even the government that defined an essential worker. It was up to business owners to decide whether or not their workers were essential, right? And so, the CEO of the music company chain that I was working for, I won't name it for, I don't want to. They
don't want to put them on a job application or on right.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously he decided we were essential to making him money while he disappeared to Muskoka, which he actually did. He lived in Toronto until COVID, and he spent the pandemic out in the boonies while we were commuting to work.
Yeah, totally experiencing the same thing that his workers were as far as the pandemic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And it's just like, so absurd, but it's just really like the government should have been stepping in and deciding what was essential and what wasn't. And like, there's a big debate, especially in the left, on like what constitutes valid government overreach and that kind of thing. But like that, we really needed to see more from our government, I think, in terms of protecting genuine essential workers and also protecting those who weren't essential, because it makes it more dangerous for everyone, right? Like, I'm on the subway with people who actually have to be going to their jobs, like, doctors and nurses and whatnot. And, say I get sneezed on by someone that I'm delivering a curbside order to, and then I make all those people sick, or, probably more likely they get sick at work and they give it to me. Like that was, again, something that really we needed. Like, that's what a government's for, right? Like, we needed that overarching body that's supposed to be impartial to step in and say, no, you don't get to just run your business like it's business as usual. You're going to take a bit of a loss for the greater good. But we absolutely do not have that in Canada, in Ontario in particular, but really anywhere in Canada.
Ontario's not to get it all into the weeds of electoral politics here, but Ontario's Doug Ford, right? That's the guy. That's your boy, right? Yeah. What a great encapsulation of impartial judgment and great governance that dipshit is, right? But I mean, again, like this stuff, obviously, like you say, you're getting into politics at this time as well. Like, really clearly influenced your music. Mm-hmm. Were there, you named off Rise Against, which is, like you said, I think a landmark for anyone that's into music that likes messaging on a political level in music. Were there ever bands as you were getting into this, or art in general, or artists that kind of spoke to you in a way that, like, sort of found its way into like developing your political views at this time, or was it, solely more the reality of of the world?
Well, it's funny because, like, it was really my life experience made me understand that music better. Like, I was, I'll take Rise Against as an example because they're probably the band I've been into for the longest, but like I was into them all through high school, and like, I thought I understood what they were singing about, but again, suburban white kid, like, not really. Right. And then, but it was funny because then I got back into them after, going through some of life's hard knocks around just how brutal employment can be. And then again, like just the polarizing and like the class war elements almost that COVID brought out. And during that time, I was listening back to a bunch of my favorite albums, and they had new meaning. Like it's similar, like, to what you said before with life radicalizing you. Like, it's such an important thing to have those experiences in order to really understand what it is that, these people are trying to tell you, whether it be artists or even, whether you're reading socialist literature or any of these things. Like, it, you can't really understand it until you've lived some of it yourself. And so yeah, it was kind of the opposite for me. It was the life experience made me appreciate this kind of music more.
I was in a similar boat myself, right? Where it was like, I was always sort of into these bands. And also it wasn't like I didn't agree with the messages or anything. It's just, you didn't really get what got them to make it. You get what I'm saying? Like, it also reminds me, you're talking about that. It reminds me of, and I don't know if you would notice this as much, since you're Canadian, you wouldn't pay attention to this as much at the time, but like we had a Speaker of the House, like a very reactionary conservative Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, several years back, that got interviewed, and he said his favorite band was Rage Against the Machine, right? And it was just it was like the epitome of like, wow, people can really consume anything and not know what the fuck they're listening to. So like that makes a lot of sense in the context of what you're talking about on the opposite side of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, going from that, you say you're kind of writing what became CruelHope, you like at least the skeletons of some of these songs when you're doing this, super essential job at a music store, right? Where does like the band come together in actuality for you, and what got you all together to start making this like a real, live and recorded project?
Yeah. So I met our bass player, who's the second longest running member of this band, actually through another band. So I was playing bass in that band. He was singing in that band. And neither of us are a part of that band anymore. It just like, it was a very kind of like strained kind of work environment. There were two guys in it who were like very close and wanted to be making all of the decisions. And that was especially difficult for Paul, was our bass player, to like come into that as a vocalist, because they'd recorded a bunch of music working with a vocalist overseas that they'd known from the countries they've lived in the past. It was like he was a very talented vocalist, but he also had like a very specific vocal style. And when they brought Paul in, the vocalist that is now my bass player, like it was just, his voice was different. And so that didn't work out. But during that, I met him, we got along well, and I showed him my stuff, and he really enjoyed it. His wife is as well as like a very leftist. And so at that time, I only had 5 or 6 demos recorded, but one of them was Wage Slave, which is out on our Spotify and is, very on the nose, like about as leftist as you can get.
Right. I would certainly agree with that. Yeah.
And so that really encouraged him to become a part of this. And then we've been through a few drummers. I don't know if it's like this in Chicago, but in Toronto, just because the cost of living is so high, like there's really very few drummers because you can't practice at home as a drummer. So every drummer is in like 5 bands and doesn't want to take on another one. But we're lucky to have found the most recent guy. I also met him through another band that I'm playing in, where I'm playing bass. He's from Humber, which is like a very high-end music college within Toronto. So when our last drummer was kind of on the way out, I messaged him being like, is there anyone else from your program who'd be interested? And he's like, I'll just do it. I was like, sick. Even better. And that's been really good. I hope that this stays as like the permanent lineup of this band, because it finally feels like we're gelling, like not just as musicians, but like as homies. Which is really important, right?
Which is arguably more important than people being the best that they can be at their instrument when you're in a band, right?
Very much so. Yeah. You really need people that want to spend time together and enjoy the music. Like those are 1 and 2. Musical proficiency, like distant third. Not that either of these guys are bad, but like, that's just a bonus.
Like if you had someone that tried really hard but wasn't like overly talented at their instrument, but were great to be around, also like helped with the creative process, and like didn't make you hate getting together as a band, that's like leaps and bounds ahead of some like what we were talking about at the beginning, some like prog snob that you can't stand being around because things aren't in 7/8 time or something, right? That's something that I think some people get lost on. They at times try to find just genuinely the best person they could fit into their band when it comes to like proficiency, and it's like, bands are like 60% that, let's be real, right? So that makes a lot of sense. It's good that you found people that were both fit the roles well and also fit the ideology well, because I think one thing that can be tough when you're doing this, which you'd be surprised with punk music and hardcore and stuff, but it happens more often than you think, that all of a sudden, like, having like messaging and political and social commentary at the forefront of your lyrics. It's weird how many people can be in this space of like what developed as like an anti-authoritarian subculture, like be mad that you're talking about cops or something like that. You know what I mean?
We lost a drummer to that kind of like difference of political views, because so he was I guess he's still alive. He is the son of like a very wealthy individual who's been like a CFO of like significant Canadian real estate companies. And
Oof.
I didn't know that at the time. Like when he joined, he was one of the bass player's friends. And so he joined and he was a really good drummer. And then he messaged me being like, yeah, I'll play a couple shows with you guys, but I'm kind of uncomfortable with the messaging. And at first I was like, I don't know, man, like you seem like a pretty regular guy. Like we're not really like calling for much, just like wealth redistribution from like a pretty small group of people. And then it's like, yes, but it is your dad though.
But it's the money you'll be getting in several years. Yeah.
It's like, it's very rare that I encounter someone that I think would, be negatively impacted by the politics that I support, but it's like, yeah. We found one.
Yeah. Which he was the drummer. He had to, like you said earlier, you got to have the space. So Dad buys a whole warehouse from. I'm just kidding. But but going from that into the music, you brought up Wage Slave. You've got at least on Spotify, if I counted right, and I'm for being a teacher, I'm pretty bad at math. But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about seven songs, I think, right, that you have on Spotify that are all either singles or little like 3-track total EPs, things like that. We could do a little bit of a lyrical deep dive or political influence if you'd like for some of these songs. I won't make you do all of them because we'd probably be sitting here till tomorrow. But let's start off with the first song that you released, at least released on Spotify. Are there other songs that you don't like people to find out about that are on Bandcamp or something?
No, they're all they're all fair game.
I just like to ask because there's been numerous times I've had people on here and then I'm able to find like the song they want no one to find on Bandcamp or some site or something. But Wage Slave, which again, you were talking about the quote unquote essential worker aspect that you dealt with in a real life scenario. In the context of your politics, the title alone can give a lot away as far as but what was the kind of opus of this song? And just kind of speak to the lyrics and the overall messaging of Wage Slave.
Yeah, so this one, there's actually kind of a fun story to this one because the chorus I came up with years before. It was something that came to me at a job that I was working back when I was doing. So it was engineering that I studied. It was an engineering internship, and it was a drag. It was a drag for like reasons that I understand better now than I did then, which is kind of funny looking back on these things. But the chorus came together. And then I just kind of sat on it for many, many years because I didn't have the life experience to finish it. I knew enough to write this kind of general chorus, but then the verses and especially the outro came together when I was, working at that Long and McQuaid. And it's just like, being, having my health and safety jeopardized just to make somebody money. I mean, that's, all it was. We were not contributing to the greater good. We were not doing anything critical. The world would not stop turning if we did not go to that job. But this guy would make less money. And so it was up to us to choose between that and unemployment. And like, that was really what filled in the rest of it. It talks about like just that dichotomy, right? Like the verses in general are sung to a member of the bourgeoisie, right? Like it's all, am I not worth enough to feed myself off of the scraps watching you stuff your face with decadence? Like that's just that comparison. And then especially just coming into that outro as just kind of a release of all the tension that it kind of builds up through the rest of the song, which is kind of meant to foreshadow the sort of reconciling of the contradictions that are growing in society now, right? Like the wealth inequality that we're watching, even the environmental destruction, all of these things, it's so clearly unsustainable. And one way or another, it will resolve. It's, there's a text by the name of Socialism or Barbarism that basically summarizes it. It's going to be one of these two things. And that's kind of what that outro is there to represent. It's, at some point, we're all going to be equal again. And, every day that things get more unequal, that reconciliation is going to be uglier.
Right. That's exactly what I got out of the song. I like that you literally referenced socialism or barbarism right there. That's like the epitome of something like this, right? So you both get to kind of speak to it from like a intellectual lens and also from a real world lens of like, this fucking happened to me and I can see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Not very cool that has to be written, but very cool song. Love the messaging of it. One other one, and then I'll have you maybe pick another one or two if you'd want to. One that I really enjoyed specifically from listening through, and obviously I liked all the songs, they're right up my alley with punk rock and social commentary, political commentary. But The World Is Ending and I'm Not Taking It Well. There was and I don't have the lyrics pulled up here on my own here, so I'd butcher like trying to say the exact ones. But I liked it was like the bridge where you're talking about you're too old, or you were born too early to be able to travel the galaxy, and you're too young to like, fuck around as a pirate, right? Like, and we're right in the middle of just like letting everybody destroy our lives and on our TVs, right? I know I butchered that, but you get the general sense, right?
Yeah, no, you got the sense of it right on.
But what about what can you speak to on this song? What's the inspiration for it, and where did that all come from?
Yeah, so this one, a lot of my lyrics come to me while I'm biking around Toronto, like for whatever reason. I don't know what it is, but this one was no different. Like I was biking around and that, like the chorus, they're like, okay, I'm a mess, burnout and depressed, just kind of like started playing in my head. And I was like, okay, this is something, this is catchy. And then it just kind of like blossomed out from there. I wrote that one, it would have been like early 2022. So like the pandemic was starting to wind down, but we were beginning to see like the economic effects that we're now like right in the thick of. And there's all sorts of crazy environmental stuff going on. Wildfire season was picking up, which, is crazy that we have a wildfire season now, but like,
and it's been even more crazy in Canada the last couple of years, especially, right? Yeah.
It's super wild. And so, like that kind of stuff was going on. And it was just like speaking to that, like the impossibility of maintaining like sanity and like, pristine mental health, just like living through what we're living through these days. And like, that's a common theme through a lot of my music of just like, how is it possible to like be a regularly functioning human? What even is a regularly functioning human in such a chaotic and dysfunctional world? And I tried to tie it into like some current events, which sometimes like, depending on how much you do that, it can be seen as tacky. And certainly now that Twitter has been renamed, like that song will probably not be that long lived. People in 5 years from now won't even understand what I'm talking about.
I think you're shortchanging yourself in the fact of like, I don't know that in 5 years people are still going to call it what it's called now. I think the one thing that people will proverbially do is the one thing that people will proverbially dead name is Twitter.
I do hope so. Both for selfish reasons and both just because like screw Elon Musk. But I don't know that whatever it is now is even going to exist in 5 years, man.
That's like, actually more valid. Yeah.
Right. It's this absolute cesspool of bots now. Like from what I've heard, I've never actually been on Twitter or X, but like it's
you're healthier for for that. Yeah. No, but I mean it total like that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's one of those things that like when I was listening through the song. And I listened through the songs you have released on my way home from work again too today, just to have it like fresh in my mind. And this one, like the term that came in my head when I listened through it a couple of times was cognitive dissonance, because in a way, like that's what you need to survive in society, right? Like, so that's kind of what the song delivers in a really and really, again, we're talking about depressing topics, but like in a way that like it's like you said, the chorus is like this catchy kind of like not like this catchy little like chorus, and then you kind of think of the lyrics and you're like, God damn, that's way too true, and now I need to like go go watch my like comfort show after this to feel all right about it. That one was a highlight for me, as well as Wage Slave. Is there one other one that you whether it was Feed or Simple Man was really cool too, especially instrumentally, or Fire? What was one other one that you really sort of enjoy the lyrical process or feel like the lyrical content of it was important for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about Fire because it's probably, like, of all of those ones, it's the most different lyrically. Like, it comes at, they're all about how the world is ending, broadly speaking, but it comes at it more from an environmentalist perspective, which really, like, I'm definitely a socialist, but I'd say I'm an environmentalist first, in the sense that, like, when I look at the existential threats to humanity, like, the class war and wealth inequality is, it may doom civilization as we know it, but climate change will kill us all if we don't do anything about it. We won't go back to barbarism. We'll go back to nothing. Yeah. And so that's really what that one's about. And it sort of compares where we are now to, again, kind of like, I like playing off of sort of absurd analogies to show just how ridiculous it is that we're in the position we're in. And so it talks about us, being in a room with a growing fire and none of us saying anything. We're all standing silent and just like letting it consume us. And it's, you wouldn't do that in real life. In real life, you'd yell fire, you'd try to make it to the exit, you'd do something. But right now, this is the situation we're in. We go about our daily lives, and those of us who are living, paycheck to paycheck, or just, reliant on our, daily wage to survive. Like, we don't really have that much of a choice, but we watch our world leaders doing the same thing. They make the same promises. The opposition makes the promises that the incumbent made the last time they were elected. And we just continue this cycle. And it's this fallacy that inaction isn't a choice in and of itself, but it's a choice that we as a society make every day. And it's a choice that we increasingly can't afford. And so, yeah, that's really where that song comes from. It's just like this, deep frustration at our social apathy, and especially the apathy of those that really are in a position to do something and just choose not to.
Yeah, it sort of sounds like the analogy you're using there is like that, that at this point, like old meme of like that dog with a coffee cup sitting in the room full of flames saying this is fine, right? Yes. Like, and that's actually a pretty good encapsulation of society at large. And you say, you're an environmentalist first and a socialist second, but like those things, for anybody that like really knows what they're talking about, knows those things are connected, right? Like, like the overarching, wage inequality and capitalism and the ever reaching for profit margins and all these things come at the like, the expense of the worker, but just as much, if not more so, the expense of the world. Right. Yeah. And so those things are so intertwined. And what you speak to in this song, what you were just talking about, remind me specifically, and again, it'll go to Canadian politics of sort of, a lot of, left leaning or well-meaning like liberal people, whether it's in Canada or the United States or other Western countries or whatever else, they'll talk a big game with Democratic politicians or the Liberal Party in Canada, right? I'm drawing a blank. Yeah. Or say the Labour Party in the UK. They'll all give these fantastical plans, right? Of like how they're going to save the environment. And like, the Prime Minister of Canada for years now has done all these, like, whether it was like at the COP summits or whatever else, gives these big claims and plans about how they're going to combat climate change. And then actually per capita, Canada is the one that's doing the worst when it comes to emissions, right? Like it's one of the few things that like, well, I'm not saying America's doing well, America's doing fucking terrible. And we always have and always will. But like, it's so interesting to see someone that like, people that are more quote unquote, like mainstream liberal minded that like Trudeau as an example will kind of tout these claims. And it's like, yeah, but they just signed off on a bunch of like, increasing of deforestation, or talking about planting 1 billion trees and doing literally 0 so far, and all these different things. And that's the other maddening part, is it's not just like on a topic like this that you wrote about very well in the song, that like it's not just about the reactionary far right people that are just like, yeah, more oil, more, like just as like a fuck you to whoever. It's the people that promise things and then are still emboldened to those same interests, and yet get to take that space that would otherwise maybe have the opening for real change, right? Like that's what this song kind of also gave me a little bit, that like it's hard to put that into music in like, a span of 3 minutes of a punk song, but you did a great job with that messaging as well.
Thanks. Yeah. It's I'm glad that you're as well versed as you are in Canadian politics, because it's really, other than maybe American politics, I don't think anywhere else speaks to the death of like faith in electoral politics more than watching what's happened in Canada. Like we've watched, the Liberal government, who again, right, are supposed to represent progress and change, and they make all of these claims around environmentalism and all of these things. We've watched them ram pipelines through Indigenous lands that they promised sovereignty to, while simultaneously doing nothing about the water crisis, or at least, far undershooting their promises there, which actually ties into it, because in some cases, clean water is used as a way to hold these communities hostage. It's used as a bargaining chip to make them relinquish those lands so that resource extraction can go on in these places. And so it's like the epitome of watching somebody say one thing and do another, and most importantly, do the same thing that the other guy would have. It shows that wherever you cast your vote, it really doesn't give you a genuine choice. And it's like, it's really sad to see that this is what it's taking for people to learn this lesson. It is encouraging to see that more and more people are realizing that, they're not going to make a difference at the ballot box. They're going to have to make a difference in their communities. And, if change was as easy as voting, they wouldn't let you vote.
Yeah,
That's kind of what it comes down to. But it's tough to then bridge that gap to like real solutions, right? Because it's like, okay, well, we know what doesn't work. What does work? And we're still in that space where, like leftism is growing, sympathy to socialist ideas is growing, all of these things, but we're not at that critical mass where we can really affect change. And perhaps more alarmingly, we're racing the people that are coming to that same conclusion, but from the right. And this is like a really scary thing, especially in Canada and in the run up to our next election, which I think is 2025, with, the support behind Pierre Poilievre, who is a pretty scary character.
Yeah.
And like, it's frustrating to watch, because he's taking a lot of working class talking points out of the mouths of the Liberals, because he knows they can't say anything because they didn't deliver for the last 8 years. He has no intention of delivering himself, but he doesn't have to. He just has to get elected, and then he can do whatever he wants. And it's going to be a very scary time if he does. So we're watching him sort of radicalize the right, and then we're watching the even further right, who are dissatisfied with electoral politics from the opposite direction and calling for really like a shift towards fascism, which of course is, it's happening in the US as well. We watch, people criticizing Trump from the right, and, so it's very scary times. Like, we definitely see a loss of faith in electoral politics, which I believe is justified, but we also see some very scary solutions coming out of some very messed up places.
Well, it's the age old thing that, you hate to bring it up, but it's the age old thing that went all the way back to like, the 1930s in Germany and what happened there. And I'm not saying this was happening in the United States and Canada the same way. I think everything happens in its own space with its own, circumstances. But you bring up such a good point there with Pierre Poilievre and like what Trump, he doesn't do it anymore. He's too far gone on these messages. What Trump did in like 2015, 2016, where it's like, yeah, the Liberal Party isn't the party of the working class, certainly not anymore. So all you have to do is point fingers at real things that they've failed on.
Yeah.
people jump on it, understandably so, especially if you're like, you used to be okay and now you're not okay from like an older generation perspective, or a younger generation coming up, graduating college and being like, where's the job and why am I in debt? And when there's not a messaging there that's like of collectivism or class struggle, and instead it's pointing fingers at the other, or it's, pointing fingers at marginalized groups, or it's pointing fingers at immigration, or whatever things you want to throw out there. It gives it's wrong, but it's terrible and it's racist or xenophobic or whatever, horrible word you want to throw out there. But it is something people can grab onto, right? Yeah. It's like the Democrats and the Liberal Party and the Labour Party now in the UK, as all three as examples. It's like when you let go of what used to somewhat, at least, not that these parties were ever great, but you let go of the one thing that gave you voters and gave you like a vision, or gave your voters a vision. It's like, it's not all of a sudden going to become better. It's just going to get a lot more fucking worse. And like, you've made it to where people that can focus on these things and have class consciousness no longer have any space in the electoral process. So then what do you do? But, like you said, kind of do things in your community, or get the message out there, or do whatever you can in like sort of grassroots mass mobilization. Instead of being in the framework that you wish you could be, to make it would, like you said earlier, it would be great if you voted and things changed. But you know what? Like, speaking as an American since 2020, that's not how shit fucking works, right? Yeah. Like, so again, going back to it, with Fire and all these different songs, going back to the music a little bit, like it's good to see somebody in a band that, you guys are up and coming. You've only been putting out music for the last couple of years, but you've got such a good message. And not that, I haven't talked about this enough because I get so into the politics side of things, that the songs are actually really fucking catchy and good too, right? Like, thanks, man. I meant to ask a little bit, and I'm sorry I get long-winded on the messaging here, but it's just fun for me, and I enjoy these things, which maybe means I have like something wrong with my brain. But is the songwriting process for your band when it comes to the instrumentals, is that still primarily you, or do you kind of sit in the room with these other two musicians and you guys kind of hash it out, or what's the songwriting process for you specifically?
Yeah. So off stage, really, it's me. Like, okay. I'll write the songs. Like, I play all the instruments. I have my electric kit there. I thought I saw an electric drum set behind you. Yeah. So all of our drums are programs, just because, again, it's so expensive to actually record real drums these days. And like, you can get a pretty good, not to nerd out too much about music, but like sampled drums sound pretty good these days. What do
you do you do that? Do you do the music yourself? Do you produce it yourself?
So I don't fully produce it myself. The first 3 songs I worked with the producer called Kyle. Actually, no, the first 6 songs I worked with a producer called Kyle Marchant, who's really good. He's been killing it recently as well. He's been doing some co-writes actually with Paul Russo from Silver Stage. So
sick.
He's out and about. And then, that kind of helped me get my feet under me, because it's great being, in the room with someone as talented as that. It's a great learning experience too, because you can watch like what someone who does this all day looks for in a song, and how they change structures, and as well just like mechanically how they engineer a session, all that kind of stuff. But it's crazy expensive. It's way too much money to be releasing at the rate that I want to be releasing. So Feed was the first test of me engineering the stuff at home and then sending it out for a mix. So that when I recorded all here, I, did the sort of pre-production and all of the songwriting myself, and then sent it out for a mix, and it seemed to work pretty well. I haven't noticed any like major difference in the sound quality. So I'm now working on like a full length album.
Oh, sick.
Yeah. It's, actually, this will probably be the first time I've talked about it outside of just like telling my friends about it, called The End of the Beginning of the End.
I love that title. That's awesome.
Yeah.
The end, the beginning of the end. That's great.
It's kind of, it's a little bit concept album-y. It was really like when I first started writing songs for this project, they were all supposed to be a part of this. And then some have been released since, and then some new ones have come to take their place. But it's really about how, we're getting to the point where it's too late. we're not at the beginning of the end anymore. We're into the end. And so it's got stuff, it branches into topics I haven't gotten the chance to touch on heavily yet. Like it's got some anti-imperialist stuff on there. It's got, more environmentalism as well. And then just, some good old, I hate my job. You should hate your job too. Let's make our jobs better. And I'm really excited about that. That's, recording is a slog. But those songs are, some of the best I've ever written. And I'm really excited for where that's going to take our sound and our presence. I'm really hoping we'll grow from that.
Well, and again, to go not to beat this to oblivion too much, but you bring up like an anti-imperialist angle and all that, and like all that still goes to environmentalism in a way, right? Yeah. Because obviously, as you could probably tell in the background for me here with the Palestinian flag and everything, it's a big issue for me. And like one thing I've tried to convey to people that like don't, it's hard for me to say this out loud, but like that don't like care about that issue that much. That's like, if you care about the environment, I'm sorry, bombs that blow up concrete dust and put, as well as bodies and like newsflash, like thousands of bombs being dropped, also not great for the environment. Yeah. Like that's also like a huge contributor to all these different issues that like, some sort of like more mainstay liberal, quote unquote, environmentalists just don't really touch. And it's like, if you're not kind of intersecting all of these issues, which you could do in a full length album, like you're talking about, right? From everything from working conditions to anti-imperialism to environmentalism. It's like, if you view all those things as separate, you're really not paying attention to the big picture. Yes. So it's cool that you can kind of take all that, make it a concept record. Not that every song lyrically has to like literally intertwine with the other, but it's all of this overarching issue that like, actually all of it, we have to change all of it, and it still might not be enough at this point, which is a great is a great salesman pitch, right, on our ideologies, but it's reality, right? So I'll be super excited to check that out. That's cool to hear that you're working on a full-length album. You've already got the title, and I'm just curious because you brought it up when you were doing the production angle, talking about the programmed drums, because I am a nerd and I do all this stuff. I don't use a kit, but I'll like literally like tap away on programmed drums. And I'm bad at it, but I'm working on it. What plugins do you use for all the different production and all that kind of stuff, whether it's the drums or anything else?
So I use SSD for the drums. Yeah. And it's pretty good. And then like what I looked up as well, and depending on what DAW you use, I use Reaper.
So do I.
Nice.
Yep. That's what this will be edited on. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. I love Reaper. It's so good.
And cheap.
Yes.
Yes.
It's really it's the DAW of the people.
Yes, it is. It is the communist DAW. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But there's some really good tutorials, and so what I've done to help make the sampled drums sound better, because even like I'll send them off to the guy who will mix them, and he'll do his own thing. But just for me to hear something close to what they're going to sound like, I'll actually send all of the different outputs within the drum kit to separate tracks and EQ them separately and do that whole thing as though it were a real drum kit. Mm-hmm. And that way, like, you get a little bit more control over like the spatial, this configuration, I guess, of it. Mm-hmm. But I found that really helped make the drums, like, bring them to life a little bit, and like, because the dynamics especially are tricky to get right with electric drums, and once you do that, you can really like dial that kind of thing in. For guitars, I use like the Line 6 Helix plugin for the most part.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. Yeah.
It does a really good job of like high gain tones, which is most of what I record with. And what's really like the selling point for me is it's so quiet. You can tell I'm trying to get sponsored by Line 6.
You and me both. Yeah, you and me both. Yeah.
It's but what I find, like, because a lot of those plugins, like, they'll do fine making the distortion sound, but then when you're not playing, you have this hideous buzz. And when you try to have a note fade out, like if you have whatever noise gate or noise reducer they have on, it'll have really nasty artifacts as it fades out. And so the best thing about the entire Line 6 suite of effects is their noise reducer, because I don't know what it is that it does differently, but it cuts down the noise super effectively when you're not playing, and it allows those like trailing notes to not have those weird artifacts. And yeah, the result is just really like nice, buttery, high gain tones, which
which is the bread and butter of punk rock, you know?
Really is,
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's great. I don't know. Maybe it'll be just for me in the recording, and it's good we're doing it at the end of it. But I absolutely like love kind of diving into those things. I could talk about it all day, and no one would listen to me, but that's okay. Well, thanks for going over this, Liam. I really appreciate it. I've just got a couple things for you if you have the time here. Just I'll do one gimmicky thing, but before that, just kind of go into what is coming up for CruelHope in 2024. You brought up the full-length album. Do you think that's something that's coming out this year? Are you trying to get, play more shows? Are you, just kind of in general, what's the future of the band looking like?
Yeah, so the album, I'm basically gonna release all the songs on it as a single prior to it. So it's a 10-song album. So I'm hoping to start releasing in June, July. So about half of it will be out by the end of the year, the other half 2025. Always trying to play more shows, trying as well to get, opening slots for touring gigs. So if you're listening to this, Shane Told, if you're listening to this podcast right now, look me up, man. Just trying to play more shows as well and like get our music out there. It's really, COVID taught us like live music is not something that we can take for granted. Like it can be taken from us at a moment's notice. So like trying to get out there and, bring these songs to life in the environment that they're built for, as much as possible. And more shows, more music, more.
What else can you
everything.
ask for, right? Yeah. I was curious. I meant to ask this earlier, but I know you at least talk about in your bio, that on your guitar you have in tape "Silence is Violence." Is that what's on it?
It is. I don't know how many people watch the video, but let me.
A good amount on Spotify. Nobody on YouTube apparently knows the show exists, but people watch it on Spotify. So.
Nice. Yeah, I got that right there. It's
nice. I love it. So what's the, because I had one other band on here, and I whether or not you do messaging or you just rock out and have fun, either one is great for a band. But I had a band on that very, very involved in organizing and messaging on stage and all that kind of stuff. But either way, have you found the live scene is pretty like welcoming of a pretty in your face messaging from a punk band? Which sounds weird to say, but you're surprised at how many people go to shows and like don't realize like underground music is political. Has it been like a pretty positive experience for you live with these messagings and like this very like heavy, in a good way, heavy-handed messaging you have in your music?
Yeah, I mean I've never had anyone come up to me after a show and be like, you dirty bastard, stop sowing the seeds of socialism in this beautiful.
My dad's a cop.
Country.
How dare you? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't had any of that yet. I think like there's a few elements to it. One, we've never played anywhere where you can hear the lyrics through the PA.
Yeah, that's very punk as well. That's very punk. Yeah.
But I think the funniest thing with that was we were playing Wage Slave in a place called Oshawa, which is east of Toronto, and it's a much more blue collar area. There's a GM plant out there, and this was probably one of the best shows we played. It was like pretty well attended, and people were really resonating with the music more than a lot of the shows in Toronto. And I remember we were playing Wage Slave, and I was looking out at the crowd, and I'm not a great lip reader, but I was able to lip read clear as day. This one guy turned to his friend and say, "This guy's a communist," as I was delivering one of the choruses of Wage Slave. And I was like, yes. I don't know if you're saying that as a compliment or an invective, but at least you got it.
Yeah.
Like, at least the
message was received. Yeah, that's right. That's awesome. One last thing, before I have you just pick the song you'll play at the end. I do this with some bands and some not, but you seem like a fun guy, so I'll throw this to you. It's a hypothetical I kind of end the show with. Say either the two guys in your band leave or you decide to make a new band and you can add anybody, any musician, any artist, living or dead, making your dream fantasy league punk band.
Ooh.
Who would you add into your band? The only stipulation, the only rule is that you are in the band. Other than that, free reign.
Tim McIlrath for Tim McIlrath. I fucked up his last
don't know
name,
how to say his last name either. Yeah.
Tim from Rise Against. That guy. Yeah, with hands down, no contest. That would be the call. Doing co-vocals. You guys get to co-vocal and co-guitar, right? Honestly, I would just play bass at that point. I'd be happy to be there.
You forget the notes you're playing, just watch him.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, maybe I'll cut this out. But the Riverside Drive band I talked about, the singer who's a friend of mine, Josh, he twice has been able to go on stage and play. I think it was Hero of War with Rise Against.
What?
In Windsor at a festival. He got to play with them twice. Yeah. So you really got to connect with this band.
Yeah, I gotta hit them up right now.
Okay, so you got Tim who's playing guitar and singing. You're apparently playing bass, right? Like, so who else is in there though? Like, who like drummer you would add? Other guitarist. You could add an accordion player if you want to. Who else is in that project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know enough like drummers household names. Like I know a couple guys in the Toronto scene that I would like draft, but I mean I'd also just draft my drummer at that point.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, is there any crazy drummer that, you know what? Probably Don Broco's drummer. I don't know his name, but like
it doesn't matter. Yeah, Don Broco's drum, like that's a band like I don't personally listen to them a ton, but the instrumentation is out of this world, you know.
Well, and what's special about Don Broco's drummer is he sings leads sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like just crazy good.
So what you're talking about right now, what you're building right now is the punk rock Eagles, where you can all harmonize together, but it's about the fall of capitalism and not Hotel California or whatever. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I forgot you're in a 3-piece band. You've already got it. You're done. You don't need anything else, do you? Yeah. Well, I mean that's a sick pick though. You got the drummer of Don Broco, which I should have looked up, but I'll put it somewhere on the screen here for people watching. You got Tim from Rise Against and you. Perfect pick. Thanks for indulging me in that. I appreciate it. The last thing again, from the songs you have released, or what song would you want to play at the end of this for people to hear if they have not heard your band before?
I think I'm Not Sick.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that one, but that is a fantastic song, and I loved the. I mean, it's like a simple art, but I loved the art that went along with it. It just like it's so works well with the messaging of it. So that's a great pick.
I make all my album artwork in Microsoft PowerPoint.
I use Adobe Express, which is like the Microsoft PowerPoint of Adobe. So that makes that works. All right, so we'll play I'm Not Sick from CruelHope. Where can people find the band on socials? Where can people follow you to see when the album's announced, when the singles are announced, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so you can find us on Spotify. We're on Bandcamp as well. And then, Instagram's where we're most active posting stuff. We're cruel_hope. If you're listening to this, you'll know us pretty quick.
Yeah. And I appreciate that there's no Twitter/X in there. There you go.
No Twitter/X.
That's a good way to save your brain. All right, we're gonna play I'm Not Sick from CruelHope, political alt punk band from Toronto. Liam, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks again for having me. This was a great discussion, man.
Doctor, can't you check my head? It seems I've come down with a case of existential dread. And I've tried meditation, medication, therapy, but all this modern medicine's just not working for me. I ask myself every day, is how I'm feeling a sign of the times or mental instability? And I know there's a million ways to treat the symptoms. Why won't you examine the cause? 'Cause living underneath the sky that's always falling's got me thinking I swear it falls apart. So I just put my phone away, watch office reruns on replay. Maybe I need a self-care day, but I've got fucking bills to pay. And I know there's a million ways to treat the symptoms. Why won't you examine the cause? 'Cause living underneath the sky that's always falling's got me thinking I'm not sick. Am I depressed if I know the only reason that I'm sad is I'll never get to live the life I know my parents had? Am I anxious if I tell you that what occupies my mind is the fires that burn out forests down or rising global tides? Am I paranoid for saying shady hands are pulling strings when the wealthy order coups from offshore pedophile rings? Can you reach a diagnosis? Can you sell me a quick fix when you already know I'm not sick? I'm just sick of it! Yeah, 'cause we're all at the brink. The ship's about to sink. Maybe this is not normal. Maybe it's time to think. Could there be a better way? Can we learn from yesterday, or are we doomed to die buried in mistakes we didn't make? And how dare you think that you can fix me when what's fucked up is reality? And I know there's a million ways to treat the symptoms. Why won't you examine the cause? 'Cause living underneath the sky that's always falling's got me thinking I'm not sick. Am I depressed if I know the only reason that I'm sad is I'll never get to live the life I know my parents have? Am I anxious if I tell you that what occupies my mind is the fires that burn out forests down or rising global tides? Am I paranoid for saying shady hands are pulling strings when the wealthy order coups from offshore pedophile rings? And I don't think that makes me sick. I'm just sick of it.